Welcome to Nonprofit Thrive, a podcast where we learn from the humans who are helping nonprofits succeed in the digital world. Now, let's get started with the show.
Okay, welcome to the show. I'm Ben Freda, your host. And on this show, we explore the stories of leaders in the nonprofit space. So the people behind the organizations, the foundations, the companies that help nonprofits change the world. Leaders like today's guest, Ryan Ozimek, who's president of Soapbox Engage, which is a suite of software tools that help nonprofits increase donations, engage supporters, run events. But most importantly, he's a really old friend of mine, which is probably why he agreed to do this episode, which is the very first episode of this podcast. So he's our guinea pig for today. Thank you so much, Ryan. I'm going to give you a larger, longer intro bio of Ryan. But before I do, I have a sponsor message to read, which I'll do now. This podcast is brought to you by the kind folks at BFC Digital, which of course is my company. So I know they're kind, or else I'll fire them, I guess. At BFC Digital, we help nonprofits thrive on the web. If you are a nonprofit communications staff member responsible for your organization's web presence, you surely know that having good web technology can absolutely be a game changer in terms of your org's ability to change the world. But you also probably know how frustrating, difficult, quirky, buggy, weird, anxiety-producing web technology can be. At BFC Digital, our job is to remove that pain for you. We can handle everything from the smallest bugs, site maintenance tasks, hosting, all the way to designing, doing UX, planning, strategizing big new websites and new web apps. We will never ask you to fill out a support ticket also, which is something people talk about a lot. People hate support tickets, so do we. Go to bfcdigital.com/podcast. You can get more information about how we can help. And if you fill out a form there, you'll get 50% off your first month of us working together, if we do work together. Now today on the show, this is like a real treat for me because obviously one of my best friends, I've known him since I was 15 years old, Ryan Ozimek. He is generously volunteered to be my very first guinea pig on this podcast. We've been friends since I was about 15. He is president of the team behind Soapbox Engage, which is a suite of online tools, can help you increase donations, sign up volunteers, engage your users. He was raised in Silicon Valley, like me, in the 80s and 90s. And so interested in technology from then on, but unlike a lot of the people we grew up with, also interested in positive change in the world and helping nonprofits and helping those that are trying to improve the world. He graduated from UCLA and then moved to DC, where he started PICnet. We'll talk about the pretty awesome origin story of your company, Ryan. He was based in DC for 18 years, recently moved back to the Bay Area, and has been bi-coastally running Soapbox Engage with his awesome team since then. So, Ryan, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Man, happy to be here. And by the way, I would have shown up to this show even if you didn't force me to do it, because I'm sure I've owed you many, many things in return for all the good work you've done in the last 25 years. And your team has been doing such great stuff for the nonprofit community for such a long time. So I'm stoked to be here. So thanks for having me.
What people don't know is that I have so much secretive stuff from you in high school that I'm black. This is big time blackmail, guys. Big time blackmail.
It's all coming out.
Yeah, yeah, totally. He has to do it. Anyway, cool. So thanks so much for joining. I think a good way to start would just be, can you just tell us a little about your journey personally? I love the story about how you started PICnet, why you started it. Can we start there and kind of go into more stuff then?
Yeah, absolutely. So way back in the day, I was a graduate school student at UCLA's School of Public Policy, and knew from really, really early on that I wanted to do something for the public good and the public sector. Also, as you said, grew up in Silicon Valley. My dad went from one tech startup after another when it was more than just mobile phone apps. It was actual things that people were physically building. So I got to see a lot of that firsthand. So I was always interested in like the marriage of the two of them. So I paid my way through the end of undergrad and through grad school by doing tech consulting, database consulting, using things like FileMaker Pro and Access databases.
I remember when
And
we were going to visit you at UCLA dorm and you were showing me FileMaker Pro. I remember this.
yes,
It was like a big deal at the time. Wow, you can do that? That's incredible. Yeah, it's
it,
crazy.
it's funny because back then, so few nonprofit organizations were using technology. There was this thing called the digital divide that people were really worried about, and making sure as many people had access to technology. And then the web and the internet and the ability to get online and see things freely from anyone anywhere was a novel idea in like the late 90s, early 2000s. And so we were literally getting in on the ground floor. And mind you, that is about the same time the dot-com bubble burst. So I like to say we started our company serving nonprofit organizations with technology when the market was crashing, nobody had any money, and technology was a passing fad that people thought were just going to be sock puppets for pets.com. So we've come a long way from doing that.
Awesome, awesome. So you're in UCLA, right? It's 2000.
Yep.
So what are the things? How did you end up with a company in DC? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah. So going through grad school, I knew that I wanted to do some work in the nonprofit and the public sector. I had a chance to spend a little bit of time working at the Clinton White House in the press office, and so I had a taste of DC. I had a fellowship that I did in grad school in DC as well too. So I knew the DC is where I wanted to end up, and it was kind of the heartbeat of the nonprofit community in the U.S. So moving back there right after grad school, was able to finagle some free office space, which was just a desk in a consulting firm that I had done an internship in the past, and said, great, my business partner and I back then figured, what can we do to provide more technology and more effective technology to nonprofit organizations? And that would mean a lot of things, from like getting on our hands and knees and wiring Ethernet cable under desks to computers, helping organizations make their first websites, creating CDs to be able to then be used in remote locations that didn't have the internet, to be able to access information and quizzes and all sorts of fun stuff that we were able to put back on CDs back in the day. So yeah, it evolved from there, and just since then, I've really been riding the wave of technology. One of the things that we wanted to make sure when we started the business is that we weren't going to make just one thing. Like, we realized if you're going to play in the technology space, if you want to do it to serve, especially the nonprofit community, we need to use the newest and the best resources that the sector has to offer. And we knew that means we were going to need to evolve the business over the years. So we never said we are just going to be doing Ethernet cabling for nonprofit organizations. We said we're going to empower the missions of nonprofits with technology, and we're going to make our way to doing that.
So and I worked with you for a little while too. Just full disclosure, Ryan hired me, and and paid me as a full-time employee for 2 years. And by that point, you guys were doing CMSs, really, content management systems, right? Like, that was the main thing. So I guess that became something that was big in the industry, right? I kind of remember
Yeah.
days.
One of the
Yeah.
things we did early in the business, my business partner, Gray Franzen, he was doing some work for an international aid organization. He was based in Albania and Kosovo during the Balkans wars that were happening in the late 90s and early 2000s, and all the recovering refugee work there. And I had a chance after doing a trip through Europe, gallivanting with a couple of friends, that I was able to get on a World Food Program plane from Rome and land in Tirana, Albania, and get to see firsthand what Gray was seeing, and recognizing that technology can be used not just to connect people to the internet, but to give people access to vital medicines and food and supplies that are needed in these refugee communities, all strung across the world. So we decided pretty early on that the company was going to not just be focused on the hardware, but also making sure the software and the access to the internet, and building websites so that people could tell their own stories, so they can share communications with others, so they can collaborate in a global fashion to meet the demanding needs of, refugee situations or disaster situations that were happening around the world. And that's what really spurred us into the content management system and the website communities back in the day.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's fascinating, man. That's fascinating. What was the promise? Like, I do remember the promise of CMS as being, hey, you can actually manage your own website. And it was like a brand new thing. Like, you don't have to be a coder to run a website. So tell me about like how that changed the game for nonprofits. The fact that you didn't have to be a coder to sort of tell people, to write content on the web.
I think we've seen the last 50 years plus, maybe for the eternity of what technology is, that when new technology comes out, it typically is only in the hands of those that understand how to use the technology, and that it needs to continue to evolve to become easier for more folks to be able to use. Content management systems were a big step forward in global publishing of information that made it really easy for anybody to be able to essentially open up a web browser, log into a website, and start adding content and telling their organization's stories. We saw that then open the door for a whole new era of online engagement. So it started with just mass communication, nonprofit organizations posting news, blogs, information about what they're doing, to then being a little bit more bi-directional. What if we use this to be able to do online fundraising to collect money? What if we use this to be able to do event registrations for galas and for events that we're hosting? What if we could use this for advocacy? We want to be able to tell the world about what's going on and then have them take action through these CMSs. So I think those early days of CMSs and giving people access to being able to manage the technology themselves is just another example where when technology has been simplified and is more friendly and easier to use, the opportunities for what it can do go far beyond what the folks who built it imagined to begin with.
Oh, for sure, for sure. So you're seeing that also, like not just in the website area, but also like you're talking about online donations, event management. All this stuff is stuff that everyday people can start to use, right? Like that's one of the things.
One of the things that we realized probably in the second iteration of the business, because we've kind of had these cycles, we're probably on our third or our fourth business cycle right now. And we recognize that over time, building websites was becoming more ubiquitous, and there's more opportunity for more folks to be able to do this and for organizations to manage it themselves. There's still, even today, there's still challenges in being able to update your website and keep it managed and writing good content. And so that's why having great partners in the ecosystem like BFC and others to be able to then help them get the information up and running and technology running smoothly, like that's still a barrier. But what we found ourselves being able to be best positioned for was sitting somewhere between the organization's website and the community of people that their supporters and donors and advocates, so that if they had a beautiful website that they're managing, keeping up and running, but if they had tools in the middle between the two of them for those online donations and for those event registrations, like that's where we saw we could really provide a lot of value in a unique way, and then really keep true to our mission of empowering those missions of nonprofits using technology, but just in a new way that was more focused on specifically online engagement.
Yeah. So let's say I was starting a nonprofit like tomorrow. I had a new idea for a nonprofit. What are the things I should be thinking about in terms of what are those external services I should be engaging? Like, what would I be really silly not to think about? Right? Like,
yeah.
You probably want to take donations online, I guess, but like, what else do you want to think about to add on?
Yeah. Oftentimes I think when organizations are getting started, one of the things they're worried about is technology, like just consuming their life. Like I see too many early stage nonprofit founders spending a lot of time on operations side, when these are things that can be delegated out to firms that are really focused on doing this affordably and effectively for them, but also be really focused on like where they need it the most. So we work with all types of organizations, like member-based organizations, foundations, advocacy groups, religious groups like synagogues and churches, and all of them have different finance and revenue streams. They all have different online engagement needs. So one of the things that I know you and I have talked about a lot in the past is that when people hear that you and I operate businesses in the nonprofit space, they just assume nonprofit means one thing. And the reality is like there's so many different types of nonprofits that like you and I are always looking to say like, well, let's get more specific. Like, what are you trying to do and what are you trying to build? And the good thing is where we're at today is that there's a lot of great technology to help organizations, especially getting started, to say what's most important. And maybe some of the most important things are what I like to call productivity tools. How are you writing your emails? How are you just using spreadsheets? How are you setting calendars? Like, how are you operating internally from a productivity perspective? And then there might be a data perspective. Like, how are you collecting the data? what type of data you're collecting. Like let's collect data on what matters and then help you analyze it. So those are some of the early big picture areas I want to help people think about as they're getting started.
That makes sense. I mean, people always say, to me at least, when I say, oh, we help nonprofits with web tech, they're always like, oh, you mean online donations, right? And I'm like, I would say 80% of our clients, online donations is not their major interest. They don't mind getting online donations, but they're either funded by a grant or they're funded by a large organization or they're a foundation or something. Online donations is maybe part of it, but like they're really interested in engaging their supporters or maybe advocating for a cause or maybe getting resources out there. It just really depends on the organization. So yeah, so you're probably right. There isn't like a universal suite that everybody should have. Like you should all have an event management system. It depends on if you're running events, I suppose.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's where our business is different than a lot of other businesses that are focused in online engagement tools in some way. So most of the folks that you see out there are selling tools that just do fundraising, just do event registration, just do advocacy. And we said for those organizations that are actually looking for a suite of apps that do all of these pieces in concert with each other, specifically for certain CRM solutions, certain database solutions that they're using, that's where we come into play. And that's where we focus a lot of our time helping organizations with selecting, implementing, and then supporting their CRM side of the world as well too.
So yeah, and so when you're talking about wanting to help organizations figure out how to be most productive internally with these things, and then you're also talking about the data piece. Is the CRM the data piece? Is that kind of what you mean by that?
Yeah, so CRM, it can mean a lot of different things, but at the end of the day in our space, it's like constituent or customer relationship management. And I think on the CRM side, a lot of organizations are collecting a lot of data in a lot of different ways. And sometimes it's about their constituents. Sometimes it's about donors. Sometimes it's about their advocates. Sometimes it's about their programs. Like there's a lot of data. Like if you're running an organization in 2024, there's a lot of data you're collecting that you might not even recognize, but you want to analyze because it's going to help you be more effective in delivering your programs and services. So a CRM is really focused on that, the collection of the data, the understanding of the data that's in there, and then integrating that data with other things so you can then take action with that data.
So basically, and examples of CRMs are what, like Salesforce and I mean there are a bunch, right? Like it's campaign,
right. And it's interesting because a lot of tools that started off as something else, they're now calling themselves a CRM. So an example might be, like if you take something like like an email marketing tool, like let's say a constant contact. Like some of the folks that have been around for a long time, like they may have started out just focusing on how do we build lists of emails and send them out and then track the data. Okay, well, I just said building a list, so that is making data. And I talked about tracking the data, so that's like reporting and the analyzing of the data. Well, let's just take two more steps to the left or the right, and all of a sudden you're really creating a database of relationship information about people, maybe other organizations, and then things you're doing and engaging with them. And you kind of have like the basics of a CRM. So like a lot of tools now can claim that they're a CRM, and I think they'd be right because they truly are tracking the relationship of their constituents.
That's interesting. Yeah. So when you, what are some, like if a nonprofit, like we talked about before, you're starting a nonprofit tomorrow, and you're interested in at least tracking some kind of data about your constituents or the people you're emailing or the people who have donated or the people you might help or your grantees or whatever. What are some of your options, and like what are good options based on different budgets? Because so many of our clients are resource.
Yeah, I think in the nonprofit space, it can feel a bit overwhelming on the technology side. So I always like to say, as you're getting started, start with a spreadsheet. Literally, Google Sheet, Excel spreadsheet, whatever it takes. Start really simple, with the goal being of like, well, what data am I tracking? And the data that matters is the data that you're going to put energy into tracking. And then you'll start there. And I think for a lot of organizations, it's going to be people data. And then thinking what that next step will be, it'll be, well, great. Well, now that I've realized that when I want to track information about a person, and then I want to track the information about how they've given me money, and then I also want to track the times I've engaged with them via email or phone meetings because they're a big donor. Well, gosh, I've now made 3 different spreadsheets. Wouldn't it be great if I had like one cockpit view of how I've engaged with this person? So I can easily be able to say, quick, I need to know before I go into this big donor meeting, how do I know this person? When did I last engage with them? How much did they give last? Which event did they show up to? And that's
Mhm.
as soon as you need to answer those questions, and it might be really quick, but as soon as you need to answer those questions and you find yourself taking too much time to do it, that's where a CRM solution is going to be the next step.
I love that as a first step because, first of all, a spreadsheet on Google Docs is free, right? Second of all, you're going to just put in exactly what you need and no more. You're not going to get bombarded by a bunch of different stuff you don't need. And third, when you do eventually decide you need to move to a bigger system, which, like you said, might be very soon, you are kind of understand what it is. Like, I mean, CRMs are essentially a glorified spreadsheet, right? Is that a good way of thinking about it?
That's right. Yeah, I would say that it's a glorified spreadsheet where you want to understand the relationship of the data in those spreadsheets. And if you're a Excel pivot tables wizard, you can kind of make this stuff happen. But
Yeah.
what CRMs tend to lead towards is easier and faster adoption to be able to get access to the data that matters. And that's really what we start to zoom in on, is not just the collecting of the data, but also focusing on the data that matters most, which is why, as you said, a spreadsheet is a good place to get started.
Do you have any example? Like, I'm just curious if I can think of an example of an organization that, went from spreadsheet to CRM and what happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so we get a chance to work with a lot of different types of organizations, and I think there's a couple of easy examples that I've got in mind. So one of them would be an environmental organization in Pennsylvania that was getting started because they were focusing on a very specific advocacy action, like protecting a certain piece of land, and they
Okay.
needed to be able to do the basics of like, great, we need to have a call to action. We need to be having a place to collect this data. And then they began to realize, well, gosh, like what's really happening here is we're not just building a list of people that we want to engage with, but we want to engage more deeply with them. We want them to be able to support our other potential options and programs we could have in the future.
Mhm.
We want them to be able to take other actions for other things that are necessary to support the wildlife that we care about. So I think starting for them on Google Sheets and then recognizing, well, gosh, like not only do we need to be able to track these relationships of different advocacy actions that people are taking, but we need to be able to make that accessible on the web. Like a
Mhm.
spreadsheet is great, but that's all manual data entry
So
for
it's
the
just
most part.
right.
As
It's
soon
just
as
on your computer. Just you can see it. No one can add to it. Well, I mean,
Exactly. When if you're doing, even if you're doing like a Google spreadsheet, at the end of the day, unless you really try to make it do something it's not built to do, like when it comes to integrating it and connecting it with
mm,
external solutions like email marketing and online advocacy, like you're just
uh,
going to hit a limit really, really quickly. So
yeah,
an
like
organization like them needed to expand.
that makes total sense. I mean, I could see, like, for instance, you want people to be able to sign up for your email newsletter on your website, right? And
Right.
let's say the form and it goes into the website. You could go into the website and highlight that email address and put it into your Google Sheet if you wanted. I
That's right.
imagine I'm getting very old. Very
Right. And that's where you start to weigh like how much time am I spending inputting data versus moving my mission forward. And as you start to add those up, where you start to feel the pain is where I like to say, like, that's where you start to invest in the technology. Now, if you've come with a large grant from a supporting organization and they say from day one, like, build your dream operations solution, like, that's a different story. But I think for most of the bootstrapped organizations that start from solving one problem on the ground, really close to them, the first step should not be go buy a bunch of technology. The first step needs to be how do we collect the data that matters and then grow with it over time? And then how do we make sure our message is being heard through things like our website?
interesting. So you're saying to start adopting technology because you'll start feeling strapped, right?
Right.
Like you'll start feeling like you don't have the capacity to continue to do the most important work because you're doing things like putting email addresses into a spreadsheet or something. Oh, that's
Yep.
great. That's great.
Yeah. And, and then I think the next piece that comes down to like determining a solution that you want to choose on the CRM side is really, well, how do we make sense of this data? And like what type of data am I collecting? So I think in this world of CRMs today, there's two different camps. There's point solutions and then there's platform solutions. And to break that down really easily, the point solutions are the ones that we've seen for years and years and years in our nonprofit space. These are specific fundraising tools, they're volunteer management tools, they're program management tools,
Right.
that they all have a CRM component. They're like tracking information about people. organizations, et cetera, how you're engaging with them. And these can be like the networks for goods, the donor perfects, even the constant contacts. Like those are very specific solutions that have either robust or very lightweight CRM parts to them. Neon CRM is another one that I'm thinking about in our nonprofit space for sure. On the other end of the spectrum are going to be platform solutions, which are kind of where we've been in the last decade or so in the corporate space or the business space, which is to say, if you just had 10 different micro databases or micro CRMs, we'd never have one 360-degree view of Ben Freda. We would just have Ben as our volunteer, Ben as our donor, Ben as our email advocate, and they'd all be separate in separate point solutions. And so these platform solutions like Salesforce and Microsoft Dynamics are probably the two biggest ones you've potentially heard of, are looking to answer the question, how do we collect data about people when we're engaging with them in wildly different ways? Or how do we collect this different data that needs to sit alongside the CRM data? So what if I need to be able to track like the books in my library? And I also need to be able to track my fundraisers. And I need to be able to track the donations and grants that we're getting. Well, that in the past might be like 5 different pieces of point solution software. A platform solutions response is, what if you had one platform on top of which you were able to build little solutions on so that everything was riding on the same platform, Microsoft, Salesforce, et cetera. The data all goes into those platforms. But the way in which you expose the data, you see the data, you report the data, well, that's just different lenses of views into that data through that platform.
This makes so let me ask you a question. So let's say the point-to-point solution, I don't know if it's point-to-point, the point solution for profit might be, we have a system for donations and everyone who donates is in there. We have a system for selling event tickets. Everyone who buys an event ticket is in there. We have a system for emails. Everyone that email is in there. But what happens when somebody who donates also gets an email? Or what happens when someone donates also shows up to an event? Is that connected? And if you're working on siloed technology, they'll all be in their own thing. So what you're saying, tell me if I'm right, but you're saying this platform, is it called platform? Is that right? That's the technology?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. These platform solutions like Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics, it's all the same people, right? And so they're just doing different things. So you have all that, you have the view into like the global view of what that supporter is doing. That's what you're saying?
That's right. And I think, so the question would be, well, why would you ever choose a point solution?
Yeah,
in the
that's what comes to mind. Yeah.
Right. So if you look at the platform solutions, those platforms are typically built for larger organizations that have more robust needs, where your technology aptitude needs to be higher, and where the solutions built on top of them aren't always going to be specific for nonprofits or membership-based groups or foundations or volunteer-based groups. Whereas the point solutions, like if you go to Volunteer Match, if you use Network for Good, if you use Neon CRM, like their only purpose in life is to live to just serve that very specific nuanced sector that we live in the nonprofit space. So you can get a more robust and functionally rich tool supported by people that 100% understand your business processes as a nonprofit organization through these point solutions, where it's going to be more difficult for you to do that in the platform space. And in the platform space, you're really tied to a consulting partner. The consultant is helping you implement the platform technology, the CRM there, for your particular use case. Now there's hybrids kind of like working their way in between or more point-like solutions on these platforms, so you get the benefit of the platform customized specifically for your type of nonprofit organization. But I think we've got a lot of road ahead of us until we get to the place where you can have your cake and eat it too. I think for the short term, where we're going to be for the next 5 years or so is probably going to be looking at what's the pros and cons for each organization of a point solution and a platform solution when it comes to CRM. And should you start with one and migrate to the other? Like, is it possible to start with one point solution for your CRM around fundraising? And then when you grow up and when that need goes from spreadsheets to point solution CRM, well, maybe you're going to go up that next step of saying, well, gosh, now we got to track grants and volunteers and everything else. We need a more robust CRM solution to handle that. Maybe you just evolve into larger, more powerful CRM.
This is helping me understand this so much better. I mean, really, just conceptually, it sounds like the natural progression is spreadsheet, one, point solution, 2. And then when you realize you're using too many point solutions and you can't connect the data, then it's a platform solution at that point. Does that sound accurate?
That's what we would typically recommend folks. And there's a challenge out there because some of the flashiest, most marketed tools that are out there are the big platforms because they attract big customers that have a lot of money riding behind them. So those are the ones you hear a lot about, the Microsofts, the Salesforces, the Amazons, the Googles, those huge platforms and ecosystems. And you might not hear about the point solutions. So oftentimes what we like to say is if you're working with somebody you already trust, so if you're working with a website consulting firm or a tech partner that you've got, that they can help you evaluate what these different options might be so that you're going into this not being overwhelmed with marketing speak and instead being focused on your needs. Because I think a lot of the times what you read about is coming from the tool and the tech perspective and not the what does my.org need. And I think it's more important to think of it through that second lens.
So where does, just because I know your expertise from this comes from working in this in the last 10 years, well, longer, 15, 20, God, we're old.
Forever.
It never ceases to amaze me when I'm like, oh my God, it's 2024. Anyway, so for you guys, Soapbox Engage, where do you fit? Like, I know you guys make tools for nonprofits to help them fundraise and do events and stuff. Where do you fit in this spreadsheet to point solution to platform solution sort of thing, like ladder?
Yeah. So one of the things that we found is that while organizations have trusted partners to get their act together when it comes to their website and managing their website and creating content for it, and maybe they've got some technology for their CRM solution to understand how to use the CRM to be able to collect the data and do something with the data.
Right.
They oftentimes are kind of flailing and have like 5, 10, 15 different solutions to be able to connect to their community through the web, through mobile devices, through technology in some sort, to enrich that data, collect that data, get people to take a particular action. So that's where Soapbox Engage comes into play. We want to be able to say, can we live above the fray of spreadsheet and point solutions for CRMs and platform solutions for CRMs, so that when somebody needs to be able to say, I need a solution built just for nonprofits that allows me to connect online for fundraising and event registration or advocacy or online e-commerce, and I want to work with a tool set that really understands the needs of nonprofits, like that's where we can come into play to essentially live between their website and their CRM or their point solution or the spreadsheet. So you can start really simply and just say, great, here's a donate page. When people make a donation, you store it in our Soapbox Engage-based solution. You can export that to your spreadsheet. You can add it into your point solution. Or for some of the bigger platforms that have more robust integration options, we can actually just directly send fundraising data, event registration data into a Salesforce or Microsoft-based CRM. So that's kind of where we've been living. Got
you. And so where do most of your clients live in that, like when they are using Soapbox Engage tools, where do they live in that sort of ladder? Are a lot of them exporting it to spreadsheets? Are a lot of them exporting it to Salesforce? Like how?
Yeah.
What's the breakdown?
A lot of the organizations. Yeah.
This is fun first podcast stuff where we're still working out, like, is there a delay? Am I talking over you? We'll figure this out, guys. This is all just,
and it's funny. It's funny because that collision of what comes first, either through speakers or through technology, like we see that all the time. Like it is so on point for this topic because oftentimes I will recommend an organization actually go right into using Salesforce. Like I know that sounds crazy, but the reason why it could work is because the way they want to use the CRM is well fit to what the platform is doing well already. So an example would be Salesforce as a platform has a CRM-based solution for nonprofits, and it's really focused around contact management, relationship management, and fundraising data. So if you're looking to do fundraising data and constituent relationship management in 2024, and you want a cloud-based system that you know you can grow into, you can have an app store to choose different apps from and integrate with a whole bunch of different services out there, Salesforce might be step one, like maybe right after your spreadsheet, skipping the point solutions, because there's a wealth of consultants that you can work with. there's folks like us that provide both the consulting services to help you get up and running with the CRM, as well as using tools that then go beyond the CRM to like connect directly with your community through your website for, say, online donations. So in that case, it might be a good fit for you. If you want to do volunteer management, there isn't actually anything out of the box with Salesforce for volunteer management. So starting with a Salesforce or a platform-based solution for volunteer management in the Salesforce space might not make sense. But for some places, it might be very feature rich to start directly in a cloud-based, platform-based solution. So we help organizations kind of understand where should they be first. And for us, because the technology is so robust, most of our clients are already using a platform-based solution like Salesforce or Microsoft.
I got you. So they're already using. So I kind of love this though. I love that there's. I mean, it's frustrating. There's no one size fits all, right? It's frustrating.
Totally.
Like, hey, I'm a membership organization. I should use this. It doesn't really work that way. It's going to depend on what your needs are, what your data is, what your internal structure is, all that kind of stuff. No, I mean, it's frustrating, but it's also realistic, I think.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of good point solutions. So like if you're a member-based organization, if you're a church or a synagogue, there are CRM solutions built just for you. And some of them might be really good.
Yeah.
Where folks start to get tripped up is when they want to go one step beyond what that point solution can do. When they want to be able to do, they've got lightweight volunteer management they want to do, and their membership CRM tool doesn't have anything to do with volunteering. Or when their church and synagogue tool doesn't give them the ability to do something like register for an event outside of the church or the synagogue. That's where they start to feel a pain. And the pain is not like, oh, well, just get an app and add it to your Android or your iPhone, just like you would like in those phone solutions. Like there's no app, there's no thing to do. And so you have to live within that point solution box. And so that's where I start to ask people really early on, like, is this all you really need? Because if this is what you need, you should do this thing that does just this thing in the box. If you are doing anything beyond that, then you should consider a platform solution as well too.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's talk about future stuff, because I'm always interested in where it's going, especially because we've been around doing this stuff since 2000, basically. And we've been around since you opened up a text document and typed HTML code into the text document and then dragged it into the server. So, and now we're in phone world and we're in Salesforce world and all that kind of stuff. So much has changed. And also, obviously, big buzzword now, AI. AI can mean a trillion different things. It depends on what you're talking about. Where do you see this going in the next 5-ish years? And if you're just thinking about starting out now, it kind of sounds like maybe these platform solutions are the wave of the future and these point solutions are the wave of the past, but is that true? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, two quick thoughts. One is when we started the company, 5 years after we started the company, Gmail was available, Facebook became available, and Twitter became available. So that's what happens in 5 years. So we went from none of those things to all of those things. So we as prognosticators might not be great when it comes to the technology space, but we do know it's changing. Whatever it is now is not going to be the same thing we're doing in the future.
Oh, totally. Brian and I have a great friend named Luke who we went to high school with, who always says that you can be a sports prognosticator and a political prognosticator and say whatever you want, and no one ever calls you if you're wrong. No one ever calls you on when you're. You can predict that the Chiefs will win the World Series, they can't.
That would be great. Now that is a future of interest.
Football team wins baseball championship. Anyway, you can predict the Chiefs will win the Super Bowl, and if you lose, you just pretend like you never predicted that. So don't worry, Ryan. No one's going to hold you to
okay.
Because you're right. No one knows. This stuff is changing so quick. I mean, ChatGPT blew people's minds, a year ago. No one thought this would happen. But so given that, what do you think?
Yes. A couple of quick thoughts. One is the stickiness and the staying power of databases has not changed. So I say that to say that point solutions that have been around in our nonprofit space for a while continue to be around our nonprofit space for a while. I don't see that shifting. I see new things coming. I see less things going. The only things I would see leaving would be there's been some merger and acquisition activity where large private equity firms are buying a bunch of nonprofit tech and then they are sunsetting them. They're collapsing them. We've seen this with Bonterra is a company that has bought a bunch of nonprofit tech brands. And essentially, been trying to merge or shut down some of those brands of tools that people have been using for a long time. I see things like that happening. There was some concerns of this happening in the Salsa CRM space for folks who are using Salsa for advocacy, some other places as well too. So I do think there will be changes like that are made through business decisions. I think from the technology space, it's hard once you've invested a lot of time into a database to move between databases. Most database projects that we're involved in, I would say 60% of the work or 80% of the frustration is the data migration. It's hard, like in the learning curve, it's hard. So I don't think we're going to see radical changes really quickly in the next 5 years in terms of like people leaving one thing and moving to another. We saw that a little bit earlier on, like a decade ago, when Salesforce's and Microsoft Dynamics became cloud-based solutions, but now those cloud-based solutions are ubiquitous. I think that mobile has continued to be important, but for folks that are really trying to make the most of their data going beyond your smartphone and managing your organization beyond your smartphone is still critical. So I still think that's important, but not going to be the wave of the future. But I agree, artificial intelligence, AI, and machine learning, that is going to be significantly changing the way we see things. It's probably not going to change the way in which CRMs look. Like you might still look at it the same, but what's been most important is the ability to collect data faster, to be able to analyze that data, make sense of the data without you having to tell it how to make sense of the data, where it's building inferences based on the data that it sees, and generating new data or new content based on ways in which data has been collected in the past. So thinking about what if your CRM were able to send the right message to the right people at the right time to get them to give based on the propensity to give, how they gave in the past, without you telling it what measures matter most. Like that's where I see that's where I think we're gonna see a big difference. So I bet you what's gonna happen. The same players will be around in 5 years, most of them, unless they've been bought or sold. And what will be happening is extreme uses of automation and AI and machine learning to be able to make us more effective in using these tools rather than replacing the CRMs as we know them today.
I see. That makes total sense. I bet you're right. I would bet on that. I'll bet on that. Just like
This is I think that if folks were to say, I want to invest in technology today, it's 2024, my responsibility, you should do so based on the needs of the pain points you felt in building this for spreadsheets. Do not be afraid of what's going to happen in 5 years, because the reality is every 5 to 10 years, we're replacing our websites, or we're replacing our CRMs, or replacing the productivity tools that we're using, or at least we're changing the way we're doing that in different ways. So just know that you're walking into a space that is ripe for change. And the type of change we'll likely see in the future is less about having to move everything and more about using it in more efficient ways with what we see in AI and machine.
Man, that makes tons of sense. I mean, this whole conversation has been very illuminating for me. Honestly, like this is great. I love learning more about this. Really.
And I do really think the marriage of like how that data is getting into these CRMs, like how organizations are using their online presence and their website to be really effective in collecting that data, to then make sense of the data, to then do something with the data, is a critical communication and marketing channel that not enough organizations are spending enough time on or treating as seriously as they need to. You can have an amazing database that I will personally create for you that will be a vacant void of existence because there will be no data in there unless you've attracted the right people to give you the information to then engage with your community.
I mean, this is kind of what I'm saying. Yeah, I say a lot, and I said at the beginning, but a lot of our clients, right? Like a lot of people who know a lot about the technology, but not 100%, right? There's so much to learn. There's so much that's changing. It's kind of stressful. It's pretty anxiety producing, especially if you're not a coder and you're an accidental techie, which is a term I learned from you, but an accidental techie that has fallen into a role of being in charge of your web presence or whatever. There is so much to know. And that you can be super effective. That you can use these tools and really just make things awesome. But it's so hard to know all the little pieces, and they change so quickly. It's really tricky. So, but this kind of thing is super helpful. Is there anything that I did not ask you that in the last couple of minutes we should cover that I should have asked? That I will ask.
The only thing that I would add is that there can be significant decision fatigue when organizations are realizing how much tech is out there and how they need to integrate this with their CRM solution, and go to your trusted partner. That could be your website consultant, that could be your best friend, that could be your colleague who's helping you run your operations in your organization, just to feel a sense of, let's focus on what our needs are first. I've seen too many organizations start with tech and follow up with process. Like anything we can do to start with process and then follow up with the appropriate tech, that makes a decision-making process a lot easier. So the tech is fantastic. I often say the relationships we build are more powerful than the tools that we use. And too often, the tools seem to be the powerful thing, like AI, machine learning. Like the tools are the thing that are getting the buzziness, but the people using them and how we use them are more critical, more important. So if you start with process and then follow up with the tech, I think you're going to be on the right path.
Man, that's really good advice. That's great. That's great. Okay. Excellent conversation. Really, thank you so much, just personally and also through the podcast, for doing this. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. I've learned a lot. I mean, so last thing is, where can people find out more about you, about your company, about what you guys do, if they have more questions and want to follow up?
Yeah, any organization looking to really boost their online engagement, their online fundraising, online advocacy, online events. If it's online and you're doing it for your organization, check out soapboxengage.com. We've been in business for 23 years. We've really understood our nonprofit community. We're excited to be standing here after these 2+ decades or so. And yeah, we'd be excited to get a chance to work with some great folks doing good things for the public sector.
Right on. Thank you so much, Ryan. Really appreciate it. Very awesome.
I'm glad that I've cleared out all of my debt for the last 30 years with you with one podcast. This has been a fantastic experience.
You've cleared it like maybe 10%. We have another to do in the future. But anyway.
That sounds like a request for a repeat guest, and I would be glad to join you in the future.
Just the high school dossier of things you did. Anyway. Photos that I can share. Anyway, awesome. Thanks again, man. Really fun. Really cool.
A pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Nonprofit Thrive podcast. We'll see you next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.